Truth Unveiled here, and today I have a very important update to share with you. We're going to be talking about the government shutdown and the reopening, and I'm also going to be giving you the updated version of this because there's a lot your government is not telling you. Not only that, but we're also going to be focusing on some other key things and talking about the effects, because while they want you to believe that the government is fully open now, is it really? That's why we're here at this report from NBC that says, open for business with 21 days of funding. Here's what happens now that the government is open. Furloughed federal workers will return to their posts, and national parks and museums will reopen, but the effects of the shutdown haven't fully vanished. And today, that's what we're going to be focusing on, is the effects, because again, they want the sleeping people out there to think that, oh, the government's open again. Oh, nothing to worry about. Oh, nothing to see here, even though it's been shut down for a record period of time of 35 days, which is 5 weeks. But anyway, let's keep going, because here's the story that they're going to give us. It says, just hours after a continuing resolution passed to reopen the government following the longest shutdown in U.S. history, President Donald Trump sent out a series of tweets about the border wall deterring migrants from Central America, the indictment of former advisor Roger Stone, and of course Hillary Clinton's emails. But as the government's reopening grabbed headlines, Trump noted among the myriad tweets that time to resolve the dispute over the border wall was already ticking away. And see, that's the narrative that they're going to keep giving you, is that, oh, it's about the border wall, and oh, we have to establish this wall, and oh, they need more funding, when really the case of the matter is what? They can just print out more money. It's not about what they're telling us. It's what? Problem, reaction, solution. They caused the problem. They're trying to get everyone's reaction. And then what? Create their own solution to their caused problems. Could that be why they've done all of this? And not only that, it's been 5 weeks. So are they trying to get people's reactions to all of this? Are they trying to get people's reactions when they have no food, or when they can no longer get their food stamps if they were to be in that situation? Are they trying to get people's reactions if they find out that they're no longer getting paid, and when it comes to some of the other things that we're going to be talking about? But according to Trump's tweet, it says, quote, 21 days goes very quickly. Negotiations with Democrats will start immediately. Will not be easy to make a deal. Both parties very dug in. Again, that's what they're telling you, and that's what the lying mainstream media wants you to believe. But what I found interesting was a report here from Vox that says, is the government going to shut down again? Here are 4 scenarios. The government is reopened for 3 weeks, and by the way, it's reopened until February 15th. At least that's what they're telling us. So what happens next? Now, we're not going to go over all of the scenarios, but if you would like to take a look at this, I will link it in the description box below. Now, it says here, out of the 4 scenarios, scenario 1, a big, beautiful immigration deal is reached, and this fight is over. Meaning that the White House and congressional leaders could find some kind of satisfactory compromise that gives Trump the money needed for the border security, while also giving Democrats enough in return to protect vulnerable migrants. Of course, we know better than that, because what? They're both on the same sides, Democrats and Republicans. It's the same darn thing. It's really no different. They work for the exact same team. Then there's scenario 2, where there's no deal at all and the government once again shuts down. Now, it says here that the government was shut down again without a new funding plan passing by February 15th if there's no deal, or the whole immigration deal. Again, that's the narrative that they're giving us. But could this also be our Creator's way of giving compassion and mercy to everyone to get their houses in order? Then there's scenario 3, and this is a very important one, which says no deal, but the government stays open and Trump declares a border emergency to get the wall. And again, that's the narrative that, oh, it's about a wall, and that what? Trump has another card to play. Could what? Declare a national emergency in order to circumvent Congress and try to commandeer the federal funding needed to get the wall. Now, again, that's what they're telling us, but pay careful attention to what national emergency. Anytime you hear that, some serious alarm bells should be ringing indeed, because we know what that is code word for. If you don't know what I'm talking about, stay tuned, because you will in just a second to come. Because again, folks, what are they preparing for? What are they getting ready for? The real shutdown. These are just tests. They're just getting ready, testing to see how everything is in place, testing to see if they have everything lined up, so that when it actually gets here and it's going to strike, when it does, everything's already going to be ready to go. And then there's scenario 4, which is this one. No deal, but the government stays open and Trump does not declare an emergency. Now, again, these are just scenarios. That doesn't mean any of them will actually come to be. However, we will keep you updated on this network as time goes on when it comes to this, because this is some very important stuff. But what we're also going to do is share with you some things that have been hidden from you, because it's very important to know, especially at such a time as this. Now, another thing I found very interesting and suspicious indeed is this report where it says that the State of the Union probably isn't happening this week. Now, normally this occurs when the president goes onto the screen and addresses issues about the nation. However, it looks like President Donald Trump's State of the Union address won't happen, even though the government shutdown, well, of course, now it's over. But then it says it was initially scheduled to give the address on the 29th before House Speaker Nancy Pelosi rescinded the invitation to speak at the U.S. House of Representatives. Now, pay careful attention. Notice how all of this is happening when in January, so-called as it's known. Why is that very important? When I tell you about the continuity of government plan and what month that typically happens in, then you'll start to understand why all of this is so very important, and how what all of this has been planned and purposed for a very long time now. So then you're probably wondering then, well, if the government is now back open and even could be back open and running past the middle of February, well, then it won't affect you, right? Well, according to several reports, there have been flight delays that have been blamed on the staff shortages when it's come to all this. Do you see where all of this is leading up to? Do you see what this is doing? Not only that, but what, 800,000 TSA workers have been without work for at least a month. Not only that, but tax returns could still be delayed. We're also going to go over food services. For a short period of time, Native American funding has been defunded. And on top of that, there have been risks of evictions, and certain benefits could be off too. Should the government shut down, or even permanently shut down? But nothing to see here. Everything's fine here. Everything's hunky-dory and fine and dandy. If you're really thinking that, it's time to think again, because I'm telling you, it's what? There is a bigger agenda at hand. Now we're here at this report that comes from WLOX, and the reason we're here is because it talks about the EBT SNAP benefits, and we've also reported on this several times about the EBT shutdown, just like we went over the one that occurred in October of 2013, and even the one that occurred back in September of 2015. And we also tied that in with what? Bail-ins, which means what? ATM outages and shutdowns that have also been taking place and tested all over the nation, where if you can no longer get your money out of the banks, how is that going to affect you and your family? But anyway, going to the SNAP program, it says here, the government issued a statement earlier this month with a comprehensive breakdown of how nutrition assistance programs are being affected by the shutdown. SNAP benefits are funded through next month. So if you use SNAP, popularly known as food stamps, in most cases your EBT card was already loaded with next month's benefits. Only if the shutdown continues into March does funding for the program run out. And that's very important to take note of, and we'll be keeping note of that and track of that on this network, because if they were to shut the government down again within 3 weeks from now, what will that mean for SNAP benefits ongoing? Are you noticing how all of this is happening right at the turn of the real new year? And not only that, but what, not one, not two, but 3 supermoons also coinciding with all of this? Does not look like a coincidence to me. Now, even though they say that there might still be ways to fund some benefits as of the march towards the spring, even if the government stays closed, could this be once again their way of pacifying the sleeping people any single way they can, even though it can affect up to 40 million people, which is what, 1/8 of the nation, by the way? And then finally, it says here that school meals are funded through the spring also, and that WIC is expected to be funded through next month, that the Special Supplemental Nutrition Program for Women, Infants, and Children, also known as WIC, has about $600 million to keep operating through next month, according to the USDA. But the program, which helps more than half of infants born in the US, is not a fixed entitlement like SNAP, meaning it's not as simple as saying what funding covers what time period. The funding is used as needed. That means that if it runs low, it may need to be rationed. But meanwhile, your president has already talked about declaring a national emergency, and if you have not already seen it, here's the clip right now.
Considered using emergency powers to grant yourself authorities to build this wall without congressional approval. And second,
yes,
on Mexico, you have.
Yes, I have. And I can do it if I want.
So you don't need congressional approval to build the wall?
No, we can use them. Absolutely. We can call a national emergency because of the security of our country. Absolutely. No, we can do it. I haven't done it. I may do it. I may do it. But we can call a national emergency and build it very quickly. And it's another way of doing it. But if we can do it through a negotiated process, we're giving that a shot.
So is that a threat hanging over the Democrats?
I never threaten anybody. But I am allowed to do that, yes.
Second question.
Called a national emergency. But I am allowed to do that, yes.
Second question.
Called a national emergency.
Now, we've gone over this in a previous videos before about the continuity of government. Now, again, pay careful attention to the timing of all of this, because you can find this at the White House website, and we're briefly going to talk about it once more, where it says the State of the Union address. When the U.S. federal agencies quietly prepare for the change in the continuity of government condition, or the COGCON level, during the annual State of the Union address. Isn't it very interesting and suspicious indeed how they're looking to change the date of the State of the Union address that was supposed to take place this week? Wow, not a surprise there. Not only that, but it just so happens to occur barely a week after the longest government shutdown in U.S. history. Oh, but it's all a surprise or coincidence, isn't it? Because then it says, because the full presidential line of succession is in attendance at this NSSE event, except for a designated survivor cabinet secretary hiding out in the White House bunker. The COGCON level of the U.S. government secretly drops from level 4 to level 3 in preparation for the president's State of the Union address to the nation. However, it's not going to be this upcoming week, according to them, so we'll keep updated also of when it will actually be. But the background says, since the days of the Cold War, the U.S. has had a plan in place to continue the operation of the government following what? A catastrophic attack on the nation's capital? Why in the world would this even be on their website? Since the days of the Cold War? Wasn't that well over 20 years ago? So you mean to tell me since at least the 1980s, if not before that, they've been planning this stuff? Wow. Then it goes on to say the 2007 National Security Presidential Directive 51 directs the geographic dispersion of leadership, staff, and infrastructure in order to maintain the functions of the U.S. government in the event that the nation's capital is decapitated by what they call a terrorist attack. And more than likely, they're probably going to blame it on North Korea or China or Russia or Iran, or any so-called enemy nation they deem fit, just like with what? 9/11 in Afghanistan and Iraq, even though the truth is it was what? An inside job. But let's keep going, because then it says, buried deep within the 102-page National Continuity Plan. We've gone over that before. If you would like to take a look at that, you can on your own time. But it says, is the strategy for the mass evacuation and relocation of every federal government agency, including the White House and the military, in response to to an exceptional catastrophic event within the national capital region. And wow, within the same time in January, President Trump even talked about potentially declaring a national emergency. And didn't some of these governments, didn't some of them shut down some of their agencies during the government shutdown? Very interesting and suspicious indeed, because then it goes on to say about the shadow government that following a catastrophic national emergency, the president or successor can authorize the establishment of a temporary shadow government to maintain control of the essential functions of the federal government. When did this happen? President Bush with 9/11, shortly after the second attack on the World Trade Center. You see that once again? Problem, reaction, solution. Now, once again, here are the COG-CON levels right here, the Continuity of Government Readiness Condition System, which establishes executive branch readiness levels based on possible threats to the national capital region, because there's always a threat to America, isn't there? So then the president alone determines and issues the COG-CON level. Now it says here that level 4, federal executive branch government employees at their normal work locations maintain alternate facility and conduct periodic continuity readiness exercises. Then level 3 says federal agencies and departments advance relocation teams warm up their alternate sites and capabilities, which include testing, communications, and IT systems. Ensure that alternate facilities are prepared to receive continuity staff, track agency leaders and successors daily. Then it says level 2 is the deployment of 50 to 75% of emergency relocation group continuity staff to alternate locations, establish their ability to conduct operations and prepare to perform their organization's essential functions in the event of a catastrophic emergency. Now, of course, we're not saying that, oh, there's going to be a catastrophic emergency this month or next month or the month after that. No, that's not what we're saying. What we're trying to get you to see, though, is why all of this preparation to begin with, because then it says level 1, full deployment of designated leadership and continuity staffs to perform the organization's essential functions from alternate facilities, either as a result of or in preparation for a catastrophic emergency. Why do they keep mentioning that on all of their websites? And on this network in the past, we've already covered things such as Gotham Shield and all of the other exercises that they've done in the Northwest when it has come to simulated exercises and drills with FEMA, preparing for 9.0 earthquakes on the Northwest and many other regions in the U.S. Why all of this preparation if everything is supposed to be all right? Now, here you can read more about when it comes to the COG-CON levels and the operations, staffing level, the time to transition, communication, succession, and the impact also. We're not going to go over that today. However, it is very important if you would like to. There's also COG-CON alert and notification process, National Essential Functions, or the NEFs, because the National Continuity Policy Implementation Plan, which is that 100-page document, identifies 8 national essential functions which represent the overarching responsibilities of the federal government during a crisis. And here are the 8 right here where they say ensure the continued functioning of the 3 separate branches of government, maintain and foster effective relationships with foreign nations, protect and stabilize the nation's economy. Please, that's the last thing they're doing. But then it says provide leadership visible to the nation and the world, protect against threats to the homeland and bring perpetrators to justice, provide for the critical national health, safety, and welfare needs of the U.S., defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Please, when have they ever defended the Constitution? That would explain getting rid of all those unconstitutional executive orders. And if that were the case, then Trump would not be issuing a national emergency. And as we've gone over before, who are the enemies according to them? Who are the domestic enemies according to your government? Well, if you look at some of their documentation, it's not who you think, because then it says respond to and recover from domestic consequences of an attack, because you could be a terrorist if you're watching this video right now. You could be a terrorist if you know the truth about the government and the truth about 9/11. You could be a terrorist according to them. And because of that, well, they need to fight off this threat. And then they go over the presidential line of succession, which was according to this Presidential Succession Act of 1947, as you can read right here. But then also, they also talk about on the same page, Eagle Horizon 2019. Now, we talked about this last year, and I'm briefly going to go over it again. But it says the Eagle Horizon exercise requires each federal executive branch department and agency to test their COOP plan by deploying their emergency relocation groups, or ERG, to secret remote locations where they will perform their essential functions, ensuring the preservation of the government. In addition to all executive departments and agencies, the White House offices and senior staff also participate in this exercise. The EH, or Eagle Horizon, uses scenarios such as what? Hurricanes, improvised nuclear device detonations, even though we know the truth about that, earthquakes, and cyber attacks. What are they really getting ready for? Because they did it last year in 2018, and what were some of the objectives? Examine and validate the capabilities of federal, state, local, tribal, and territorial governments, as well as private industry, non-governmental organizations, community organizations, and members of the public to take coordinated and inclusive protective actions prior to projected major hurricane landfall in accordance with applicable plans, policies, and procedures. Then it says demonstrate and assess the ability to conduct inclusive post-hurricane landfall response operations and simultaneously conduct inclusive recovering planning activities. Demonstrate and assess the ability of federal and non-federal government organizations to implement continuity plans and perform essential functions appropriate for incident conditions to sustain NEF, or National Essential Function, and examine and validate the capabilities to support the energy sector in synchronized efforts to manage the consequences of long-duration power outages and critical interdependencies. Wow, isn't it very interesting and suspicious indeed how last month what happened? Your government released a document talking about a power outage that could affect up to 75 million people in the nation, and not only that, could last up to 6 months. Why are they even talking about these things and documenting these things in the first place? Now, the very final thing that we're going to go over today is Project 908, and we've talked about this briefly before, but it says the National Program Office, or the NPO, was an office of the U.S. government established to ensure continuity of government in the event of a national disaster. The NPO was established by a secret executive order, which are unconstitutional, by the way, by what? The National Security Decision Directive 55 that was signed back in September of 1982 by Ronald Reagan during what? The Cold War, in preparation for what they call a nuclear war, presumably with what? The Soviet Union. Could this be getting ready for what? World War III potentially? It was classified top secret and then referred to as what? Project 908. Now again, I'm going to link all of this in the description box below so that you can see it and read it on your own time. Now again, this document itself is 908 pages long. Of course, we're not going to go over all of it, but what I did want you to see, as we've gone over before, is that within this document is what? Your government that's using certain areas in secret places to turn them into what? Potential FEMA camps, because here we are at page 44, and who also is involved? More alphabet soups, the DOJ, Department of Justice, FBI, and what does it say here? The following facilities have been tentatively selected as potential relocation sites. Your office should confirm the name and address of the facility, discreetly identify the owner and or on-site manager with identifying personal data, and conduct indices checks. And again, this goes all the way back to the 80s, so of course they've made tons of progress. And again, if you take a look at this, the government what? Has their hands on what? They have their hands on all of these different park mills and plastic places and all of these industrial places, as you see right here. This just gives you a list of the different places that they what? Secretly have taken over. Are they secretly taking over these places and these railroads and these abandoned places and abandoned malls and secretly converting them into FEMA camps? house, secretly getting ready for a secret national shutdown and a secret national emergency so that when it happens and the mainstream public is unaware of it and not ready for it and everything is shut down and they can no longer get their money and their funds, will the FEMA camps already be ready to go? Please seek Yahuwah and his true son Yahusha, because as you can see, there is a whole lot going on and a whole lot going on behind closed doors, and it's important to be awake, alert, and aware to the world around you. But as long as we have Yahuwah and his true son Yahusha, we have nothing to fear whatsoever. This is Truth Unveiled here, keeping you updated and saying as always, Shalom.